In this video, me philosophizing on okayness as it pertains to distinctions within the overarching subcomponent personality characteristics, most concerned with bringing into balance certain imbalances within one's subjectivity, as it pertains to distinctions within self-regulation and or attentiveness and or satisfaction, each meaningful for engaging the hypothalamus and or executive functioning in terms of certain imbalances within one's essential and or necessitated underlying psychological needs, relevant and or appropriate and or meaningful to certain situations, to the exclusion of other essential and or necessitated underlying psychological needs, irrelevant and or inappropriate and or meaningless to certain situations, as one is desiring to bring into balance one's often meaningful emotions, yet is mostly related to one's subjectivity, meaning the meaning in affect. One experiences certain pangs of discomfort and or deprivation and or desires to engage more positive meaning in affect that's navigational to satisfy certain essential and or underlying psychological needs, engaging the executive functioning that's future oriented, often releasing dopamine that even within experiences of discomfort and or dissatisfaction, one may experience certain positive meaning and affect that's associated with that future-oriented anticipation of satisfying certain essential and or necessitated underlying psychological needs. Yet, this is not as meaningful as the satisfactions, as the satisfactions themselves tend to optimize the synthesis and or reuptake of dopamine that is meaningful for current to future oriented learning in terms of optimizing certain essential and or necessitated underlying psychological need satisfactions, more sensitive to error monitoring in terms of the incorrect responses that are more likely to elicit negative meaning in affect, that are mostly related to the opposite polarity of satisfaction associated with dissatisfaction, and are more likely to be experienced by individuals who have certain deficiencies and or impairments and or disabilities in terms of certain underlying psychological needs satisfactions. This is most related to substance abuse disorders and or individuals whom are more likely to engage in immoral and or anti-ethical misconducts that are inappropriate to satisfying certain essential and or necessitated underlying psychological needs meaningfully. However, dopamine is not uniquely what's most meaningful to the balancing sensations within one's being. It's most related to serotonin. Interestingly, there are serotonin receptors even within one's tongue that are sensitive to the satisfactions of certain essential and or necessitated underlying psychological needs released from the hypothalamus that often cues within one's being the imbalances with depleted serotonin. And it's the balancing of serotonin that's meaningful for the feelings of satisfaction combined with dopamine that cultivate okayness within one's being. Meaningful to influence self-regulations that pertain to distinctions within one's ability to satisfy certain relevant and or meaningful and or appropriate essential and or necessitated underlying psychological needs within more self-control and or the appropriate approach and or avoidance responses from engaging more meaningful self-control. The opposite polarity being impulsivity. Individuals who tend to be more impulsive have serious impairments in terms of serious deficiencies and or disabilities and or deficiencies in terms of feelings of satisfaction, and are more likely to have deficits and or impairments and or disabilities in terms of experiencing even okayness itself, as satisfaction is most meaningful to the experience and cultivation of okayness, who may also have more impairments and or deficiencies and or disabilities in terms of thinking about okayness, and who may be more concerned with how others may think they feel in terms of okayness and may desire to overcompensate and communicate feeling more positive than one otherwise normally experiences. Compared to attentiveness, the opposite polarity being inattentiveness, is most sensitive to certain changes within one's internal and or external conditions that one's monitoring, more unique to feelings of satisfaction and or dissatisfaction. Not always being cognizant per se, meaning attentiveness is mostly related to okayness and or the being satisfied within certain situations with a higher acuity to what one needs. So it's more sensitive to those pangs of discomfort and or deprivation that are meaningful to engage current to future oriented self-navigations within meaningful self-preferential evaluations that satisfy certain essential and or necessitated underlying psychological needs that are appropriate and or meaningful and or relevant to these certain pangs of deprivation, to the exclusion of other irrelevant and or meaningless and or inappropriate underlying psychological need satisfactions, including overindulgences, meaning there is a proportionate need to infer the correct responses to satisfy the correct deprivations and needs. Fatties who tend to overindulge and engage in binge eating are more likely to have certain abnormalities, including within appetite, and may desire to consume more food that they may need, and whom are ultimately more likely to experience more deficiencies and or impairments and or disabilities within attentiveness, whom are more likely to experience certain random and or spurious thoughts and or whom are more likely to experience discomfort that disrupts meaningful utterances of thought, and whom are more impulsive, whom are more likely to engage more hostility in terms of coercing others to demand the appropriate satisfactions for, in some cases, the relevant and or appropriate and or meaningful essential and or necessitated underlying psychological needs inappropriately. So they may need certain need satisfactions, yet may engage in more harmful and or overcompensatory misconducts that are harmful to the essential and or necessitated underlying psychological need satisfactions, that are more likely to dysregulate healthy psychological functioning and or subjective well-being, resulting in more ill well-being to the detriment of one's physical and or psychological health, as well to physical and or psychological well-being, ultimately from depriving one of the need for meaning in life. Whom individuals who experience more okayness are more likely to engage in more balanced thinking in terms of the proportionate amount that is most correct to satisfying the best approximations of what one needs in order to engage healthy psychological functioning and or experience more positive subjective well-being that uniquely is relevant and or appropriate and or meaningful to the deprivations within one's essential and or necessitated underlying psychological needs. Cultivating more meaningfulness processes within being. That's all I want to say for this video. Hope you have an awesome one. Keep moving this after that.